Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, it is the NFL trade deadline. Will the Steelers make a move, or will they just head into the second half of the season without making any big trades? We'll talk about that. And Mailbag returns. We answer your questions right here on the show. It's going to be a fun episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. More on Game Time later. All right, y'all, let's talk about this trade deadline. I know we have harped on this a lot. I talked about it yesterday, but I think it would be irresponsible to not address the trade deadline situation as the Steelers head into the final day here. The Steelers, like we said, have been working the phones. They tried to get Christian Kirk. Didn't work out. He got hurt. They tried to get Brandon Ayuk early in the offseason, again, with low-balling offers, not trying to go too hard for him. Didn't work out. They were supposedly in the talks for Davante Adams. He didn't want to go to Pittsburgh. He wanted to go play with Aaron Rodgers. They've tried time and time again with certain guys. And I still think that they aren't going all out for most of these players. They're sort of feeling out how things are going. And then, if a player gets hurt or if another team wants to sign up for more money or something like that, they're like, it's fine. We're not doing this. And I still think this is the right approach for Omar Khan. Be patient, take your shot when the shot is there that you see the right value to trade for. Now, there could be a move made even before the time this episode gets posted. I might post this a little bit early because God forbid, I cannot have another Steelers making a trade well after I record an episode. I'm recording this mid-afternoon, I guess late afternoon Monday, because I have to cover Pitt basketball in a couple hours for their season opener at the Peterson Event Center. By the way, if you're ever there, feel free to say hi when I'm in the press box pretty much the whole game. So we're getting into this. There's a chance the Steelers do make the trade before then. If not, hopefully this is just the episode that's going into Tuesday untouched. But I still feel like part of this whole talk about the second wide receiver position, this has changed a little bit, even more so because of how Russell Wilson's playing and because how we've seen Calvin Austin take on his role as a receiver in this offense. You saw in this last game, he had a huge touchdown against the Jets. You saw he had the big play on special teams. I think Calvin Austin's a guy who has gotten open a lot. Alan Saunders and I have talked about it a lot. We've talked about it on All 22. I've talked with Nick Vrabel about this. But Calvin Austin, while he's no premier threat right now, yet he's still young and developing and figuring things out, he's a guy that a good quarterback who's seeing the field could take advantage of and find ways to hit in different parts of the field for big plays. That just wasn't something that Fields was doing too often. He did do it against, I think it was the Broncos game or the Chargers game. I forget which one it was. Might have been the Chargers game where he hit him over the middle. He broke down the middle part of the field and scored the big touchdown. I think that was the Chargers game. He's made play, but he wasn't being a consistent part of the offense where he's just been running over the middle part of the field uncovered or have beaten his man so badly that he looked uncovered and just not gotten the ball. And I think Russell Wilson's starting to find those places to get him the ball while also not compromising the chances to get George Pickens his chances, to get Pat Freiermuth his chances, to get the ball to Darnell Washington when he has open space and he can just run over people for 10 yards. Again, Calvin Austin isn't going to be the premier threat of the Steelers offense, but there's smarter ways to use him and other guys in this passing offense to make the ball go. And that being said, it does not mean that just because of that, the Steelers should just not try to add anybody. They should, especially when you see the Ravens just gave up a pick swap to basically get Deontay Johnson. If you could do that and get a guy to add to your pieces, sure. Adam Theilen, Darius Slayton, Jakobi Meyers, those are the three guys I have my eyes on as far as reasonable guys to target to see if you can get them for cheap and see if you fit them into your system. But if you don't, I do not think it's the end of the world. I also don't think that's the difference between winning the Super Bowl and not winning the Super Bowl this year. I don't think that they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, but I do think that as they are constituted right now, they can be a serious AFC contender, and that's a real thing. I still think that right now, if you're looking at the AFC, NFC and its structure. The Chiefs are at the way at the top, but then you got the Bills, the Ravens, the Steelers as the next three teams. And I'd say the Texans, are the other team in that mix, but everyone's kind of jockeying right now for who's going to be that top team to take on the Chiefs later in the playoffs. And, the Steelers get the Chiefs later in the season. And again, I don't think the difference between the Steelers and the Chiefs right now is a number 2 wide receiver. I think the biggest thing the Steelers need to improve on is continuing to grow the chemistry between Russell Wilson and his receivers on offense. The offensive line needs to get stronger. The running game need to learn how to continue to balance the running game with the pass game. Again, Russell Wilson, you look at his yards per attempt average on play action passes and deep balls. He's been very efficient with that. Use that to your ability. Keep balancing this offense, and you may not need to trade away anything to get that receiver. But I still think that Omar Khan should still be working the phones because you never know what deal might work out for you in the long run. We didn't think that Russell Wilson would just come so easily in the offseason. Turned out he did, and that's how Omar Khan flipped this quarterback room around in a single offseason. And just a month's time, he went from Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and legitimate arguments about who was the better one for a big part of this season, and some people who still think Justin Fields should be that guy. All of that being said, I'm urging caution for Steelers fans who've been begging for a trade, DK Metcalf or whoever, to realize, hey, this team has been doing well, and they don't need to go out and get a wide receiver just to get a wide receiver. Would it help? Absolutely. If they can get one for just a swap of picks and they're keeping all their day 1 and day 2 picks, great, awesome, good job. But if they don't get one, it is not the end of the world, in my opinion. I've been saying that since March when people were wondering if they should trade one back and the free agency even opened. But I think you're starting to see the balance of this offense. And if you get another playmaker, great. You can have another thing to balance up in there. But I don't think that's going to be what makes or breaks the team. What makes or breaks the team is going to be this defense truly being elite in the second half and the offense hitting its balance with the run game, the offensive line really working well in concert with Russell Wilson's ability to attack on play action and on the deep ball in that situation. And again, the Steelers have shown with George Pickens, Calvin Austin, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, and with the running backs Harris, Warren, Patterson, all of those guys are capable of making plays in those situations. We'll see if they continue to do so. All right, now we've gotten that out the way, we're going to get to your mailbag questions. We put out the call. Again, you can always call in 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, give you a question under a minute, and we try to get your answer on the show. Plenty of you all did. We have a time to get to about 4 questions on this show. We'll answer those 4 questions next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I'll remind you that this show is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app that you need to download to your phone right now or go to their website, gametime.co, because Game Time gets you all the best tickets to all your favorite events, whether they're live sports, music, comedy, theater, whatever's going around near you or abroad. Game Time will help you find. Game Time has so many different ways to find great tickets for your favorite events, including Game Time Picks, which filters out the bad seats and gets you incredible deals on great seats so that you're not wasting your time sifting through thousands of tickets just to find the right seat for the big concert, the big game that you want to attend. The Steelers are back in town for the Ravens in a few couple weekends. Do you want to see a Steelers Ravens game live at Acrisure Stadium? A Pittsburgh crowd during a Ravens game is nuts. Get your tickets only with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and when you do, remember, Game Time gives you the best price guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less somewhere else, Game Time guarantees you that they will give you 110% of the difference in credit of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We're also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot because they are America's number one sportsbook. And here are your upcoming lines, odds, ends, all the numbers behind the Steelers-Commanders matchup. Now, the Steelers and Commanders started off the week on FanDuel with the Commanders being 2.5-point home favorites. That has maintained, but there's been some slight moves in the money line. Whereas at the start of the week, the Steelers were at plus 122. They're now at plus 126. The Commanders, they were at minus 144. They're now at minus 148. A very slight, not too big of a move at all of the towards the Commanders in the money lines there. But the interesting thing I thought I saw was the over under going from 44.5 points to 46.5 points. That's interesting to see why FanDuel is making those moves, but you can see all the moves that they're making and make all the moves that you want to make on FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Download FanDuel today or go to their website, FanDuel.com. And when you do, you'll be able to see all the opportunities for you there, including if you're a new customer and you bet $5, you can get $150 in bonus bets if you hit on your first $5 bet today. That's right, $150 in free bets to new customers if you just win your first bet of $5 or more. Only on FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here. And as I said before, we're going to get into our mailbag, which means we're answering your questions here on the show. As always, you can call into the show at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute, and you can get your question answered right here on the show, as we will have about 4 people here. Also, shout out to people who did call in. You called in with good questions. You kept it. You didn't all ask the same question, which I always appreciate because it makes it easy to sort things through. But we do apologize for the mailbag not being open for a while. But hey, during the season, it's a lot harder because we got day-to-day topics, and I got to produce fast and work and record fast so I can get to everything else that I'm doing. So with that being said, let's get to some of our questions here. And this one's a different kind of question. And I have to give this guy credit. Kevin from Boca Raton in Florida asked an interesting question about a move the Steelers should make, but not one around the trade deadline and the players. Check out Kevin's question.
Hey, Chris, this is Kevin from Boca Raton, Florida here. Appreciate all you do. I'm just curious your thoughts. There's a lot of talk going on about signing a new wide receiver or maybe another player to help us boost our lineup. And I'm curious if maybe the thing that would help us out most right now is going to get somebody like a Mike Vrabel to help us more on the defensive side with someone like our inside linebackers. I feel like we're maybe missing a few coaching pieces to really get the best out of this team. Would love to know your thoughts. Appreciate all you do. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. And as always, you can call 412-223-6644 to get your question on the air, just like Kevin did there. So let's address one thing. Mike Vrabel is currently with the Browns right now. He's a consultant there. He's been there, I think, since the summer. So I don't think he's actually available for the Steelers to take. But the idea of the Steelers going and adding a coach mid-season, that's a rare thing to happen in the middle of the year. I think Steelers fans think back to, wait a minute, what about Brian Flores? You got to remember that was still the offseason, and they had time to get an onboarding process. I also am not 100% sure that the Steelers need a new linebackers coach of all people. Aaron Curry is the current linebackers coach. I think Aaron Curry is actually doing a pretty good job. Peyton Wilson has been steadily progressing. I thought last year Aaron Curry did a remarkable job with practice squad linebackers being in that unit and them not being too big of a liability in games, where I've seen the linebacker position look a lot worse than it did last year with practice squad guys and guys like Miles Jack coming out of retirement. So to answer your question, could the Steelers do it? Sure, they could look into anybody out there. I mean, maybe they find some help on the offensive line, specifically to help with Broderick Jones. And there's times that Steelers alumni come back and they help out indirectly or so. Like, for example, right now, Ryan Shazier has been coaching on the team. He's been helping the running backs out, and that's been an interesting thing there to see. It was funny listening to Denzel Martin talk about Ryan Shazier saying, like, hey, that guy's gone, sometimes has to go from Ryan Shazier to Coach Shazier. And I thought that was a cool bit from him. But also James Harrison comes back in occasionally and just works with guys and reminds them of certain techniques in pass rush moves and things like that. So to answer your question, long story short here, Kevin, I don't think it's a move they're going to make. But if they were to add a person like that, I think it would be a hyper-specific person that's going to help solve a problem here and there. But who knows? Maybe they should look at other guys like that during the offseason. I've always been one to think, I thought Mike Vrabel was fired hastily by Tennessee. I thought it was a mistake on their part. They're not exactly looking too good without him right now. And I think that he's going to be a head coach again sooner rather than later in the NFL. I think he wants to be I think he wants to work in a place that's going to, or in a capacity that's going to allow him to stay out of the spotlight for a year. And then when it's time to get back into the coaching groove of things, heck, Dennis Allen just got fired from the Saints. I think then he'll be able to choose, like, okay, what's the best situation in the NFL for me to go to next so that I can get my second shot at head coaching there. So don't think it'll be Vrabel, and I'm not sure the Steelers make this move, but I like the way you're thinking because the Steelers getting other help there would be, I think an aggressive move, and it would be an interesting move to see how the Steelers coaching staff could change in the middle of a season, but maybe not, if not in the middle of the season, maybe later in the season. So with that being said, let's keep these questions rolling here. This one comes from Jovan in Youngstown, Ohio, very close to Pittsburgh. Jovan, take it away.
Hey, Chris, Jovan Chapman here from Youngstown, Ohio. Hey, do we feel like Najee has earned himself a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I know he's earned himself a contract elsewhere, but do you think the Steelers have seen enough to bring him back home? Thanks, man. Love the show. Keep doing what you're doing. We love you guys.
Thank you, Johan. Appreciate your question. Appreciate everyone who calls in. Again, that's 412-223-6644 to get your question on the air. And that's a good question. I know there's a lot of people out there, like Alan Saunders comes on the show regularly and says they're not re-signing Harris. They're just not doing it. I'm sorry. I think they should. I think it would be silly not to. Najee Harris would not be overly expensive. You wouldn't be paying, super top dollar for a running back in the NFL for a guy like that. You'd be keeping a guy that's not only been playing well for you, but is growing in your Arthur Smith system, which you're assuming is going to be there for quite some time. If you're the Steelers, you're assuming he's probably not leaving after a year or 2 years, maybe 3 years at best. But if you get Najee Harris if you sign him to a 2-year extension after this year, that's 2 really good years of having a running back in a system that's playing really well. And you look at what other guys are costing right now. Like you would have to pay him in the top 6 of running backs for him to even eclipse $10 million a year. Like like $10 million wouldn't be like the 7th most per year average that a running back makes in today's NFL. Derrick Henry's making $8 million a year. Granted, he's 30 and at the back end of his career. But guys like DeAndre Swift, guys like Aaron Jones, guys like James Conner, they're not making huge chunks of money. They don't have these ridiculous contracts that other positions have. And I think Najee Harris is absolutely worth something like that. If they paid him even 10 a year, I think that would be a solid number for the next 3 seasons to keep him around, let him continue to cook. I think you've seen him play very well this year. He's averaging 4.4 yards per carry this year, and it's an offensive line that's growing, and you're expecting it to get better over the next few years. Zach Frazier's going to get better. I think Troy Faltano, when he gets healthy, he'll be better. I think Broderick Jones will get better. And Mason McCormick's getting better. And Isaac Seumalo's around for another year, and maybe you get another piece there at some point. But I really do think that with this offensive line maturing, with the offense in general maturing, people getting used to Arthur Smith's offense and Najee Harris eating, ever since that Colts linebacker called him soft in the Colts game, he's averaged over 5 yards per carry. He's gotten over 100 yards 3 times. I think he's averaging 91 yards per game in the last 4 games. This is a guy who I think, Najee Harris, you want to be part of your locker room, because not only does he bring that energy on the field, he brings it off the field. If you see this guy and how he energizes other people, the motivation that he brings, the positivity that he brings to the Steelers offensive room, the camaraderie he has with Pat Freiermuth, and the leadership I think that he can bring as far as what's expected of a Steeler, I think that's a guy that you want to have in there. Plus, he also doesn't fumble the ball. He hasn't fumbled it once this year, and he protects the ball, and he's healthy. You need guys like that, and I think this is a if the Steelers get rid of Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren becomes your top guy. And I know a lot of people really like Jaylen Warren, but I still think Jaylen Warren's a guy that needs to be packaged with someone else because he's smaller. And as you saw this year, he gets hurt, and sometimes it's going to happen when you ask too much of him. But I think Najee Harris and a Jaylen Warren as a package are an amazing running back combo. And if you get rid of Najee Harris, then you got to go spend a draft pick or something to go back and get the running back position to pair with Jaylen Warren, and then hope that works out as well as Najee Harris is right now, and that he fits Arthur Smith's offense. But why do that when you have this right in front of you? It wouldn't be expensive to keep. It'd be a simple thing to do. You'd keep a guy in that likes you. You like him. The team likes him. The players like him. The system likes him. It just makes that much sense to go and re-sign Najee Harris. And again, not for stupid money, but for like $8 to $10 million a year. If he takes that, rolls with it, you keep him around. And then, if let's say Russell Wilson moves on after this season, even if he doesn't move on, you can see that these two seem, I think they do have a chemistry. But if Justin Fields becomes your guy in the near future, again, having a running back that you can trust, that the team trusts, that everyone relies upon like that, can be a very calming, easy factor to help the quarterback get used to the offense and solve questions in the toughest of moments when the Steelers are up against them. So will they do it? I don't know, Yvonne, but should they do it? I think absolutely. I said before the season started in training camp, they better sign Najee Harris before the season starts, because I think he's going to have a big year and his price number is going to go up. And I think that right now he's showing that could be the possibility. Could he price himself out of Pittsburgh? I don't know. But I think certainly right now he's playing at a pace that's going to show, hey, I've been better than any of the numbers that you've seen, and I'm the only running back in the NFL that's had 3 straight years of rushing for over 1,000 yards, because he's been healthy and been able to stick it out the long way. We got 2 more questions to answer here on the Locked On Steelers podcast with our mailbag with all the people who've called in, so stick with us. Maybe your question gets answered next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I'll remind you this show is also sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. With Thanksgiving this month, I have a lot of people to be thankful for, including my fiance, who puts up with me having to record these shows at the most ridiculous of hours some nights. Thank you, honey. I love you very much, and I appreciate you for putting up with me. This month, it's all about gratitude. And along with the person that I just shouted out, there's other people that we can't thank ourselves, and that's ourselves. You can't thank yourself enough sometimes. And sometimes therapy can be a good reminder to give thanks to the people in your life, but also including yourself as you're going through your daily life. Therapy is one place that you can sort out just what parts of your life that you could be thankful for, so that you can be better understand how you can improve your day-to-day life and find the best version of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows life can be busy and stressful, so it's designed to be suitable for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here today, taking your questions on the Steelers mailbag, a Locked On Steelers mailbag. You can call in at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, leave your question, and keep your question under a minute. Also say where you're from. Do those things, and you can get a chance to get your question answered on the show, just like these people who got their questions in. This is a question that Jesse from Miami, Florida, who's called in before. Interesting question here, because it's one we've asked a lot this season. I think we haven't revisited it too much as there's been so much going on, but this involves the offensive tackle situation. Jesse, take it away.
Hey, what's up, Chris? This is Jesse from Miami. First, I want to thank you for taking my question earlier this year. I got so excited about it, I was bragging to my friends about it the entire week. My question is pertaining to my biggest concern for the Steelers, Broderick Jones. I was at the Giants game this past week, and I noticed at one point late in the game when Dan Moore had to come out of the game for apparent injury, Broderick Jones looked over to the sideline, and it seems as if he was asking to be switched over to left tackle, which I believe they said no. I then noticed he just threw his hands up in frustration, and I was wondering if you think that maybe some of his recent struggles are a result of a building frustration with the fact that he's not playing his natural position of left tackle. Thanks again.
That's a good question there, Jesse. Appreciate the question. As always, 412-223-6644 to get your question on the show. Here's my thing. I think one thing that Broderick Jones, at least when we've talked to him, I think he's done a good job hiding it from the comments that he thinks he should be playing left tackle in general. I think that there's sometimes he's acknowledged some frustrations, like some of the calls made against him, and sometimes he feels certain ways about certain things, but I haven't seen him complain too much about the side that he's lined up on. He's talked about, hey, he was brought here because they think he can do both, and he wants to prove that he can do both. And do I think there's some frustration? Sure. I think he also knows that, like, even beyond the whole comfort level thing, left tackle is the position in the NFL that gets paid. If you're a great left tackle, you make ridiculous money versus right tackles. And I think that that's something that Broderick Jones also is being mindful of, is I want to get to there because that's where my career is going to be crazy. It's also where, he might be a little bit more, familiar. I mean, look at TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. It's a whole big thing when those guys flip sides of the field because of just the familiarity that they have with rushing on their sides, with the technique and the levers that they use. Imagine the same thing, but now you're in pass protection and the importance of that. Do I think that Broderick Jones wants to be on the left? Absolutely. I think that that's something that he definitely wants, and there's probably some frustrations up in there. But if I'm the Steelers, I'm looking at my offensive line right now, and Dan Moore's playing well. I don't know if y'all are paying attention to that. Like I was even doing tabulating. By the way, I'm going to try to do my midseason grade show tomorrow with Alan Saunders. We'll see if that works out. There's always a lot of things that get in the way, but I did my tabulating of who's gotten stars and skulls so far this year, and so I'm hoping to present that to you guys so far this season. But looking back, like I looked back at all my grades for the 8 games. I had Dan Moore. He got either a star or a skull every single game. He got basically 5 games with stars and 3 games with skulls, and 2 of his stars games were 2 stars, and all of his skulls games were 1 skull games. He's been good this year at left tackle. So like, the other, could Broderick Jones have been moved in that moment to left tackle? Maybe, but Dan Moore Jr. also went back in. So I think they were more like, hey, Broderick, just keep working on right tackle because the guy's going to go back in soon. So it's be easier for you to just stay at 1 and try to get better at that than to switch you over here to switch you back over there. And Broderick Jones hasn't had a good season so far. In fact, in those 8 games, I think it's like the reverse, actually. I have him with 3 positive grades and 5 negative grades in the first 8 games. And he needs to be sharper. And my message if I'm the Steelers to Broderick Jones is, hey, young guy, we drafted you. We traded up to draft in the first round for a reason. Need you to improve. No matter what side you're on, find those answers. And I think Broderick Jones, he's mature enough. I think that, there might be some frustrations in different parts. It's also possible that the complete that the body language could mean a bunch of different things. Could all sorts of confusion. There's times that we all think that we understand something that's going on in the field, and myself included, and then find out after the fact with more context that that's not the case. So, Jesse, good question. Do I know if it's his frustration? I don't know. I do think at some point it'd be nice to move him to left tackle if he can take that on. And then Troy Fautanu plays right, but obviously with Fautanu hurt and Dan Moore playing well, this is the lineup that you'll have, and I think this is the lineup that it will stay in until further notice. All right, we got one more question. This one comes from Cody out in New Mexico. Cody, take it away.
Hey, Chris, this is Cody Silva from New Mexico. Man, I do not think that the Commanders look that tough. I expect a big Nika week and a lot of interceptions. What do you think? Thanks.
Thank you, Cody, for your question. As always, we appreciate everyone who calls in to the Locked On Steelers podcast, 412-223-6644. Leave your name, your question, and keep your question. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Okay, let's get something out of the way about the Commanders right now. They are playing very well on offense. And yes, they've had games they haven't looked great, like that Bears game where they won with the Hail Mary. Wasn't a really good game on their part. But overall, numbers-wise, they have the number 3 offense when it comes to total yards. They're like just around like the top 10 when it comes to the passing game, but they're also running the ball really well. They have the 3rd most rushing yards in the NFL, 163.9. And by the way, their offense, number 4 in the NFL at 29.2 points. This is going to be a challenge. Like, I know that the Commanders have been bad in general, in past years, but this year they've done what they're supposed to do. Now, do I agree with you that maybe there's a little bit of overhype happening? Sure, because I look back at their opponents and I struggle to find the really strong win. They lost their opening game by 17 to the Buccaneers. They've beaten the Giants by 3, the Bengals by 5. They blew out the Cardinals. That might be their most impressive win because the Cardinals are atop the NFC West. But they beat up on a bad Browns team. They beat up on a bad Panthers team, and they eked out the Bears with a Hail Mary, and they eked out the Giants last week. Now, again, the Steelers shouldn't sleep nobody because I think the Steelers haven't played their best football yet either. But do I think the Commanders are going to finish atop the NFC East? I have a hard time seeing that. I think that they're a young team. They still have both their Eagles games left. They still have even though FanDuel favors the Commanders, I think the Steelers are going to win this game this weekend. They still have the Falcons on their schedule and the Cowboys twice, even though the Cowboys aren't playing too well right now. But I still think the Commanders have stuff to prove, and that's going to be something that plays out over time. But I would not say that the Steelers are going to just beat the snot out of them. I think this is going to be a good football game. I think they're going to, Minkah Fitzpatrick might make an interception in this game. It'd be the first time since 2 years ago that he did. But all that being said, I do think that the Steelers just need to stay focused. It's not about, whether this is an easy game or a hard game. Just go in there playing your style of football and let that be the thing that prevails over the Commanders and adjust to the things that they're trying to do to get their run game going. That's been the 3rd best run game in the NFL this season. Hope that answers your question, Cody, and hope that everyone enjoyed getting their questions answered here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, as we did a mailbag episode answering all the questions. Again, follow me, Chris Carter, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily episodes of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back tomorrow, as we now know the fate of the Steelers through the trade deadline. We will try to have an update episode, an emergency episode, if a trade happens in the middle of the day. We'll keep you updated here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.